it great?
Filled with beautiful, wonderful people. Thank you for coming and spending my release week with me.
Hi. Yeah, all of these people that you're ruining with toxic, sapphic vampires.
Yeah. I'm just trying to warp their minds, their hearts, their souls, all of those things.
You're accomplishing that, so well done.
Thank you.
Happy one day after release.
It's wild too, right? Because like release day is this thing that we build up and we work toward it as if it's an end, not a beginning. But it's so weird because for the author, in many ways, it is an end. It's an end of our control. But it's a beginning of your experience. And so this is the part that's scariest for me, because truly I have done everything that I can do, and as a type A person, as a controlling person, as a neurotic person, it would be really great if somebody could tell me something I could do. And my editor was backstage with me before, and I was like, can you just tell me what to do? And it's like the answer I keep being given is, enjoy it. And I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do that. But I will say that this is my very first tour in the 25 books that I've had that I have not been on deadline. And this is the thing about being on deadline, is like, it's because I'm always working, and I love that, it's important to me, but being on deadline kind of creates a dissociation where I'm here in body and in mouth and promoting, but my mind is doing other things. And I decided, I was writing Victorious, the third book in the villain series. And I finished it a month and a half early so that I would not be on deadline on this tour. The reason being, I thought, being present is kind of uncomfortable for me. I actually really like the dissociation. But I thought, if there's one book I want to be in the room with, if there's one audience I want to be in the room with, it's this one. This book means so much to me that it felt like it would be a disservice to the book if I was anywhere else. So yeah, that's all I'm saying. Thank you for welcoming me.
And we knew that was going to be vampires. That was really fun for us.
Yeah.
That was a good time. And I didn't even know what was going to be in the book. So how did we land on vampires?
Yes.
And maybe what are some things that have had an impact on your vampires?
I love that. So, yes, I said I was going to write vampires, and I think a lot of people wondered if they would sparkle. And what I need you to understand is they don't. I love vampire novels of all kinds. I tease, I love, but I have a problem with a lot of the recent vampires, and that is that they're sanitized. They're very straight, very sanitized. But if you look back at the origins of vampire lore, vampire canon, vampire literature, it is so inherently queer. It is so defiant of the binaries of gender and sexuality that it seems to me a crime to negate that. And not just because it's sex, right? But it's identity, it's freedom, it's ambition, it's, as I said, it's hunger. And so I wanted to write a love letter to the Anne Rice school of vampires, the Gothic romantic, which is as dark and as strange and as scary, but as human. Like, I like to think of this, and by extension, Addie is existing in what I call the garden. And the garden is just my low fantasy scape. My low fantasy, what I mean is, if reality is like 2 feet on the ground right here, and high fantasy is 50 feet away. So you have to take 50 steps away from here to there. It's a big departure. And that's Tolkien, right? You will only ever access that fantasy through the pages of that book. And halfway there is Lewis, who says somewhere in your house is a wardrobe with no back. But he's halfway there because he's still a portal. You still have to exit reality in order to enter that fantasy. But I'm intoxicated by the fantasy that's in our world. I want to take one step and keep one foot in reality and say, it's not actually about the kind of escapism where you leave our world behind. It's only the kind of escapism where you leave your life behind. And you bring the magic in, and you bring the power in, right? And that's seductive in a completely new way, because that teaches you that magic could monsters could be real. And I think when we're children, we're encouraged to play make-believe in our world. And then for some reason, when we become adults, the idea becomes that the only acceptable place for make-believe is within the confines of that step 50 feet away. And I don't want that. And that's what I loved about things like Anne Rice, is that she brought the wonder and the magic and the monsters into our history, into our time, and into our landscape, and breathed life into them. So yes, I wanted to write a love letter to that era of vampires, and also create my own era of vampires, right? Get to look at the other side of it as I felt I could, as strange as I could, and take some of the things I love about classic vampire tropes and leave some of the things that didn't serve because they felt arbitrary. I like rules. I like them. I think they provide something to play against. So I wanted to create my own rules and my own mythological systems and trappings for my vampires, and so everything revolves around the heart. And this is not uncommon, right? We have to stake a vampire in the heart in most books, but I wanted it to be more than that. The heart is the only mortal part of my vampires. They can sustain damage in any other way, but if the heart is destroyed in any way, they're dead. But I wanted to go further than that's the literal heart. But the existential heart, the metaphorical heart, is humanity. So my vampires begin to decay morally, humanity-wise, over time, until it could take decades or it could take centuries, but all that's left is animal hunger. All that's left is a predator. And so I wanted to look at the different forms of a heart and see how I could use that to kind of build my own reality for my vampires. And I say reality because I want it to feel real. And the last part of that, and it's such a little part, but it's so important to me, which is that when my vampires feed, their heart begins to beat again. And it only beats for the length of time that they're feeding. And so it's like a stolen moment of light, of life. And that explains why it's so desperate for them to do it, why they're so hungry for it, because it's the only moment where they truly get to feel what they felt before. Every single scene of the book. So I figure out essentially the narrative order of a book, meaning the order in which you will experience it. And then once I have the entire narrative order, I break it out into the chronological order, the order in which the characters will experience it. And then I write each character's perspective in its entirety in order so that I hold the voice and the evolution. And then only once I have all three characters in their entirety do I braid the story back together into narrative order. And this allows me to make sure that each one of the women in this book feels incredibly narratively and linguistically and stylistically distinct. Because it's three very different women. Because again, no monoliths, right? Three individuals. And so I had all of the pieces, but I had two narrative orders. And they were reversed. And I could not for a while, my editor and I went back and forth on which one would be the best one. And this is the one that we chose. And I like that because the other one, I think, would have stalled you out in the third. So instead, this is a little bit like a dominoes. It starts with Sabine because without Sabine, there is nothing else. Yeah, but we leave Sabine at a point in the story wherein her humanity is beginning to shut off. And I did that intentionally because I think as she becomes more opaque to herself, she needs to become more opaque to the reader. It's the same reason Luke doesn't have a perspective in Abbey LaRue, which is that some things are much better if you don't get to see them from the inside out. And so I needed a point at which she became essentially unknowable to the character and to the reader, and essentially becomes mythic to the reader.
It works.
I'm so glad. In case you can't tell, every little, this is such a deeply imperfect book because there's no such thing as a perfect book, but every single thing is intentional. If you read it and you think, I wonder if she meant to, yes. I promise you I did. I wonder if that's an allusion to, yes. I promise you it is. Like it or not, I have obsessed over every single thing of this book.
It's been so fun. You've said some of the things that were important to you, vampires have become quite sanitized.
Yeah.
Queerness was really important. important. But could you expand upon that even more of
Yes.
like,
Why lesbians?
yeah, why lesbians?
Yeah.
It's what we clearly all wanted. But
Yes.
why was that so important to you?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I am a lesbian. In case that part wasn't abundantly clear by now. I write villains or antagonists, and for a very, very long time I felt dissuaded. I was dissuaded from writing a queer villain, a lesbian villain specifically, but a queer villain in that the fear was, what was imparted to me, and what I also feared, was that I would be accused of conflating queerness and villainy. And for a long time I let myself listen to that argument. I was like, oh, it's fair, it's fair. But it's not fair, because what it actually is reductive. Because what you're saying when you say that is that queer people, queer characters, and by extension queer humans, are not entitled to the same degree of nuance and complexity as their straight counterparts. That if they're on page, they must be on a pedestal, right? And that is such nonsense, right? But I have to confess something, which is that I've been in the industry for 15 years now. And for the first 11 to 12 years, I did everything I could to make myself small. I did everything I could to reduce my identity, to assimilate, to appease, to fit in at a table or a room in a community that did not care and did not want me, right? I first downplayed my femininity. I downplayed the fact that I was femme. And then I came out and I downplayed that too. I downplayed my own queerness and by extension the queerness of my work for years because I was convinced that it would help me be accepted. Because I so desperately wanted to be accepted. And I had to realize that all I was doing was hurting myself. Because those people that I was trying so hard to make myself small for were never going to accept that. And what I was only doing was damaging my own relationship to my creativity, was hindering and hobbling myself, was marginalizing myself. And so I was like, I really want to write a lesbian villain. And they were like, oh, be careful. You're a token lesbian and you make them a villain. And I was like, fine, they're all lesbians now. Lesbians now. You know all of them, right? You can't accuse me. But also, it was like, I reached that point where I had to come to terms with myself about being complicit in my own shrinking. And it really was the wake of Addie LaRue's success that pushed me over the line. And I think it's very important to credit that because it is cowardice, right? And I needed something. I needed something to make me resolved. And in the wake of Addie's success, I decided if you do not transmute this success into boldness, what is the point of success? If you only use success to make yourself feel safe and stay in one place, what a waste. I knew in the wake of Addie LaRue that I could write a novel and that it would get mainstream treatment, mainstream support, that I had built this incredible readership and new readers. I had everything I needed except my own bravery. And I was like, fuck it, here's what we're doing. I'm gonna write a toxic lesbian vampire novel. Hator, my publisher, I was like, remember Addie? Wasn't that great? Let's do that again. But this time, instead of immortality and hope, it's immortality and hunger. This time, I know it was kind of queer. It's going to be hella gay. But basically, yeah, so it had to be... It's a story I've wanted to write for a really long time. It's a dynamic I've wanted to write for a really long time. It's a level of complexity and nuance and messiness and grit that I've wanted to write for a really long time. But I had to get to the point where I thought, if not now, never. Right? If I don't feel comfortable enough to be bold, to become uncomfortable, then what a waste.
Well, and to that I say, happy Pride.
Yeah, right? Anti-prescriptive advice person, because I run a podcast called No Right Way. And the thing about No Right Way is that there is no right way to write. And every week I interview extremely successful creatives about how they do it. It is also kind of a psychology podcast because I'm less interested in their finished work and more interested in all of their neuroses. Like if I feel like they have their shit together a little too much, I'll be like, but what does the inner voice say on the bad day, right? Like, what's the critic? Like, what tells you to quit? Anyway, sometimes I'm trying to make myself feel better, right? But I don't like prescriptive advice in general, but I have a piece of advice for aspiring writers and writers who are just starting, and it's because when you are starting, the hardest thing to do is to get to the end. If 1,000 people have an idea for a book, and let's give them great odds, 500 people of those 1,000 actually start writing that book, I say maybe 75 finish. Because we get shiny new ideas, right? They come into our mind, they lure us away. What it actually a shiny new idea is like your mind becoming acclimated to the story that you're currently writing, and so it loses its shine. So the first new idea that you have becomes extra shiny by comparison. But the idea must lose its shine for you to execute it. It's losing its shine because you are becoming intimately familiar with the work that you're doing. So my advice to aspiring writers is in the interest of helping you not quit, not abandon ship, and it is this. Find the ending. Find an ending that excites you so much that you want to get there, so that on bad days you do not quit, and on good days you have momentum. It takes a desert and it turns it into a football field, a finite amount of distance that you still have to cross. But then if you get stuck, you can say, okay, I'm here, and the end of the book is the end of the stage. What's one thing that needs to happen between here and there? It's finite, and as soon as distance becomes finite, it becomes manageable. Suddenly you're creating a path to the end of the story, and all you need to do is get there. And once you get there, you can make it better. Once you get there, you can throw that ending out if it turns out you don't like it, but it will get you to the end, and that is 95% of the battle for an aspiring writer.
Okay, sticking with this,
Yes.
actually, somebody else wanted to know, how do you tackle imposter syndrome?